What if I told you the most dangerous person in your life already has your house key? They know your alarm code. They've sat at your dinner table. They've laughed with you. They've held your child. And one night, they decide you're a problem. There was no forced entry, no shattered glass, no masked stranger hiding in the dark, because the killer was already inside. It was the kind of quiet American neighborhood people moved to for safety. Tree-lined streets, porch lights left on, neighbors who waved every morning before work. No one locked their doors during the day. Nothing ever happened there. Until it did. On October 14th, just after 9:30 p.m., 911 received a call that would shatter that illusion forever. A man reported that he had just found his best friends brutally murdered inside their own home. His voice trembled. He said he had come by to check on them after they stopped answering texts. He claimed the front door was unlocked. When officers arrived, they expected a burglary gone wrong. What they found was something far more disturbing. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no ransacked drawers. The house was eerily tidy, except for the living room. That's where the bodies were. The victims, a married couple in their early 30s, were well known in the community. Friendly, successful, social. They hosted barbecues. They helped neighbors. They were the last people anyone expected to be targeted. Detectives immediately noticed something chilling. The security system had been manually disarmed using the correct code. Whoever did this didn't break in. They were let in. Or worse, they were already inside and standing in the driveway, shaking, crying, hugging officers as if he couldn't believe what he'd seen, was the man who made the call. Their closest friend. The person they trusted more than almost anyone. At that moment, nobody suspected him. But sometimes, the most terrifying monsters aren't strangers lurking in the dark. Sometimes, they're already in your living room. In small towns across America, friendships often feel like family. That's how people describe Daniel Harper. Daniel had known the couple for nearly 7 years. They met at work, bonded over weekend trips, fantasy football, and shared ambitions. He was the uncle to their toddler. He had a key to their house. He knew their alarm code. Everyone said the same thing. Daniel was loyal, reliable, always there. After the murders, he became the center of sympathy. News cameras caught him wiping tears from his face outside the police line. He gave interviews describing them as the best people I've ever known. He organized a candlelight vigil. He even helped the grieving families plan the funeral. But detectives noticed small inconsistencies. Daniel said he hadn't seen them in a week. Yet phone records showed multiple late-night calls. He said he stopped by randomly that evening. Yet GPS data placed him near the house earlier that afternoon. Still, suspicion alone wasn't proof. There were no fingerprints out of place, no weapon recovered, no obvious motive. And yet one detail kept bothering investigators. Daniel had been the last confirmed visitor to the house the night before the murders. He admitted they had argued about something personal, but refused to elaborate. Was it money? Business? Something deeper? When asked directly whether he could have harmed them, Daniel looked shocked. Why would I do that? They were my family. But as detectives would soon discover, sometimes betrayal isn't sudden. Sometimes it simmers. And sometimes the person who cries the loudest is hiding the darkest secret. The crime scene team spent days inside the home, reconstructing every detail. Forensic specialists confirmed something chilling. The victims likely knew their killer. There were no defensive wounds suggesting they fought off an intruder. No overturned furniture from a struggle. Toxicology reports later suggested they had consumed drinks shortly before their deaths. Drinks prepared in their own kitchen. Investigators dusted glassware and found 3 sets of prints. 2 belonged to the victims. The third belonged to Daniel. When confronted, Daniel didn't deny it. He admitted he had been there the previous night for dinner. They'd had drinks, talked, laughed. He left around 11 p.m., but neighbors reported hearing raised voices that evening. One neighbor recalled a loud argument around 10:45 p.m. Another thought they heard a door slam. Daniel insisted it was nothing serious. Just a disagreement. We worked it out. Except the timeline didn't add up. Phone activity from the victims stopped abruptly around midnight. Daniel's phone, however, pinged off a tower less than a mile away at 12:17 a.m. Why was he still nearby? Detectives quietly began digging deeper into his finances. And that's when the motive began to take shape. A joint investment, a failed business venture, and a missing sum of money that could tear apart even the strongest friendships. This wasn't random violence. This was personal. And the closer investigators looked, the clearer it became. The killer didn't force their way inside. He didn't need to. He had already been welcomed. Financial records revealed that Daniel and the male victim had invested nearly $250,000 into a startup project 6 months earlier. It was supposed to be a tech consulting firm. Promising. Profitable. Instead, it collapsed. Bank statements showed something troubling. Large withdrawals. Transfers into accounts connected solely to Daniel. When questioned, Daniel claimed the funds were temporary reallocations. He insisted he planned to repay everything once new investors came in. But there were no new investors. Instead, there were gambling transactions, online betting sites, casino withdrawals. Daniel was drowning in debt. Text messages recovered from the victim's phone painted a different picture of their minor disagreement. "We need to talk about the money. This has gone too far. You promised. I can't keep covering for you." Those were the last messages sent hours before their deaths. The pressure was building. If the victims exposed Daniel's financial deception, he could face criminal charges, public humiliation, bankruptcy. For someone who carefully curated a reputation of success and loyalty, that would be devastating. Still, motive alone wasn't enough. Detectives needed proof that Daniel was in the house when the murders occurred. That proof would come from an unexpected place. A smart home device, the kind millions of American households use every day. A device that listens, and sometimes remembers everything. In the corner of the kitchen sat a voice-activated smart assistant. Like many American families, the couple used it for music, reminders, and home automation. What most people forget is this. These devices store data. Investigators obtained a warrant and accessed activity logs from the night of the murders. At 12:11 a.m., a voice command was recorded. "Stop. Don't," followed by a crash. Then silence. Voice recognition analysis suggested 3 voices in the room, including one matching Daniel's vocal patterns from previous recordings. Daniel insisted he had left by 11 p.m. The device told a different story. Even more disturbing, the security system logs showed the alarm was armed at 11:42 p.m. and disarmed at 12:03 a.m. using the correct code. Only 3 people knew that code. The victims and Daniel. The noose was tightening. But Daniel wasn't panicking, at least not outwardly. He continued attending memorial events, hugging family members, posting emotional tributes on social media. To everyone watching, he looked like a grieving friend. To detectives, he was becoming the prime suspect. And yet, there was still one missing piece. How had he thought he would get away with it? The answer would reveal a level of calculation no one expected. Forensic reconstruction showed something subtle but critical. The scene had been arranged. Blood spatter patterns indicated the attack began in the kitchen, not the living room where the bodies were found. The victims had been moved. Why move them? Detectives believe Daniel tried to create the illusion of a random act of violence. He left a back window slightly ajar. He disturbed a drawer in the bedroom. But it wasn't convincing. Nothing of value was taken. No electronics. No jewelry. No cash. A staged burglary rarely looks natural. Daniel underestimated something else. Time. Security camera footage from a gas station 2 miles away showed his car parked at 12:32 a.m. He entered the store, bought a bottle of water, and appeared unusually calm. Receipt timestamp, 12:34 a.m. If he left the house at midnight, as he claimed, why was he driving around the neighborhood half an hour later? Prosecutors would later argue he was trying to establish an alibi. But digital footprints are hard to erase, especially when you're emotional, angry, desperate. The more investigators uncovered, the more the image of the perfect friend began to crack. And finally, They made their move. An arrest that stunned the entire community. Because the killer wasn't a stranger. He was the man who carried the casket. Daniel Harper was arrested 3 weeks after the murders. The press conference was brief but explosive. Authorities announced charges of double homicide and financial fraud. The neighborhood watched in disbelief as officers led him away in handcuffs. People who once described him as loyal now questioned everything. At trial, prosecutors laid out a chilling narrative. Daniel had confronted his friend about the money. The argument escalated. In a moment of rage, or perhaps calculated desperation, he attacked them both. Defense attorneys argued there was no direct eyewitness, no murder weapon, no DNA proving he delivered the fatal blows. But juries don't just look at evidence. They look at patterns, phone data, financial records, voice logs, GPS tracking, security codes. Individually, each detail could be explained away. Together, they told a devastating story. And then came the most emotional moment of the trial. A recording from the smart device. The voice saying, "Stop. Don't," followed by Daniel's voice. Clear enough. Close enough. Familiar enough. The courtroom fell silent. Trust had turned into evidence. And friendship into motive. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. Family members wept. Some in relief. Some in agony. Daniel showed little emotion as the verdict was read. The judge described the crime as a profound betrayal of trust. He sentenced Daniel to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In interviews afterward, neighbors struggled to process what had happened. How do you ever trust anyone again? That question echoed beyond one street, beyond one town. Across America, millions watched the story unfold because it touched on something universal. Trust. The belief that the people closest to us would never harm us. Yet history has shown again and again, some of the most shocking crimes are committed by those within arm's reach. The ones who know your routines, your passwords, your fears, your weaknesses. Daniel didn't need to break down a door. He had already been given access, and that made the betrayal far worse than any forced entry ever could. Experts later analyzed the case as a classic example of intimate betrayal homicide. When financial pressure meets wounded pride, emotions intensify. Daniel wasn't a career criminal. He had no violent record, no history of assault, but mounting debt, fear of exposure, shame. Those can be powerful motivators. Criminologists note that crimes involving betrayal often stem from perceived loss of control. Daniel's reputation was collapsing. His secret was unraveling. Instead of confessing, instead of asking for help, he chose elimination. It's a chilling reminder that danger doesn't always come from outside threats. Sometimes it comes from within social circles, within friendships, within homes. And technology, once seen purely as convenience, became the silent witness that exposed the truth. Without digital evidence, the outcome may have been very different. This case became a warning story in criminal justice seminars across the country, not just about greed, but about how quickly trust can transform into vulnerability, and how betrayal cuts deeper than violence alone. They trusted the wrong person. That sentence sounds simple, but behind it is a devastating reality. The killer was already inside, not hiding in the shadows, not lurking outside, sitting at their dinner table, laughing at their jokes, holding their child. Trust is what makes communities strong. It allows neighbors to feel safe. It builds friendships. It creates families. But blind trust can also create opportunity. This story isn't about paranoia. It's about awareness. Know who has access to your home, your finances, your security codes. Pay attention to red flags, especially when money and secrecy collide. Because betrayal rarely appears overnight. It builds quietly, behind smiles, behind handshakes, behind loyalty. And sometimes, the person who says, "I would never hurt you," is the one you should question the most. If this story made you think, share it. Because true crime isn't just entertainment. It's a reminder. The most dangerous threat isn't always outside your door. Sometimes, it's already inside.